You won't believe what my parents did with my $41,000 savings for my brother. Full story. You're not going to believe this, but my own parents tried to take my $37,000 business fund just to help out my jobless brother. But what I did next? It left them absolutely speechless. That's me, the younger one in the family. I'm 19. My older brother, Matt, he's 24 and basically the golden child. Life's always been handed to him on a silver platter. He doesn't work, hasn't held down a job for months. And when he does have one, he either quits or gets fired for doing something dumb. He's that guy who somehow gets everything while doing absolutely nothing. Meanwhile, I've been busting my tail working part-time jobs while going to school, and somehow I'm the one they expect to have it all figured out. I've been saving since I was 15, stocking shelves at grocery stores, delivering food, picking up whatever gig I could just to build a future for myself. I didn't want to get stuck in some boring 9-to-5 job. I had a business idea, and I was serious about it, so I saved every penny I could and ended up with $37,000, all mine, no handouts, no help from my parents, just me grinding every single chance I got. You'd think they'd be proud, right? Like, hey, our kid's really doing something with his life. Nope. Instead, they started acting like my hard-earned savings were just sitting there, waiting to be used for whatever problem Matt had that week. About a month ago, Matt suddenly decided his apartment wasn't good enough anymore. Keep in mind, he doesn't pay rent on time, when he pays it all, and he doesn't even have a job. But now, he wanted to move into a fancy new place in the nicest part of town. And of course, he didn't have money for the deposit. At first, I didn't think twice about it. I mean, why would they ask me? Matt's a grown man. If he wants something, he should figure it out himself. But then one night, my parents sat me down, and I knew something was off, because they only do that when they're about to drop something heavy. I thought maybe, just maybe they wanted to ask about my business plans, maybe even say they were proud of me. That would have been nice. Instead, my mom gave me that serious look she uses when she's about to drop a guilt trip and said, "We need to talk about Matt. He found an apartment, but he's short on the deposit." I just sat there, not sure what this had to do with me. Then she hit me with it. "We think it'd be a good idea if you gave Matt your savings. He really needs this place. And the money's just sitting in your account anyway." I blinked at her, thinking I must have misheard. My savings? The $37,000 I'd worked my butt off for Matt's apartment? I couldn't even respond. It felt like I'd stepped into some kind of alternate reality where people think that's a normal request. All I could say was, "Wait, what? What?" My dad chimed in, trying to sound all reasonable. "Matt's been going through a rough time, and we think, as a family, you should help him out. It's not like you need the money right now." My face got hot. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "So, you want me to just give him the money I've been saving for my business?" I asked. "Yes," my mom said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "When you're family, you should be willing to help." And the way they said it, like it wasn't a request, but a demand, just ticked me off. They expected me to hand it over like I owed it to Matt. Then my dad said something that really hit me in the gut. "If you're not willing to help your brother, maybe you should start looking for another place to live." I swear, my heart just stopped right then. They were threatening to kick me out. Over Matt's apartment, over money I earned. I couldn't believe they thought this was okay. I mean, I'd worked for every single cent of that $37,000. That money was my way out, my future, my freedom. And they were treating it like it was up for grabs. They must have noticed I was stunned because my mom kept going, rambling about how family comes first and how Matt would do the same for me. Yeah, right. Matt's never lifted a finger for me, ever. He won't even help around the house, let alone with money. I told them I needed time to think. Just a way to stall, honestly. There was no way I was giving them that money. But the truth was, I didn't know what to do. I couldn't afford to live on my own yet, not while trying to launch a business, and now they were threatening to kick me out. The next few days were hell. My parents acted like I was the bad guy. My dad started dropping passive-aggressive comments like, "Must be nice to have money and not worry about your family." My mom gave me the cold shoulder. And Matt? He didn't say a word. Probably didn't care, as long as he got that fancy apartment. It felt like I was living in a pressure cooker, and every day they found new ways to turn up the heat. My mom would randomly start talking about how stressed Matt was and how I should step up for the family. Uh, my dad went the backhanded route, stuff like, "You're lucky you don't have real responsibilities yet," or "Family sacrifices keep us strong." Yeah. Okay, Dad, none of it worked on me. If anything, it just made me dig in deeper. But man, it was getting harder to deal with. I started avoiding home altogether, staying late at school, hanging out in the library just so I didn't have to deal with the daily guilt trips. It was exhausting. And just when I thought I'd finally dodged a guilt session one night, well, you won't believe what happened next. My dad stood there, arms crossed, like he was laying down the law. "If you're not willing to help your brother," he said, "then you're not welcome in this house." And there it was, the ultimatum. I felt a weird mix of anger and relief, and angry that they actually meant it, but relieved the waiting was over. Now I knew exactly where I stood. "Fine," I said, my voice flat. "I'll be out by the end of the week." My mom burst into tears. My dad just stood there like he'd won some big moral victory. And Matt? Of course he wasn't even home. Probably out with his buddies like always. I walked back to my room, head spinning. Deep down, I knew I was doing the right thing. But that didn't make it any less scary. I had no real plan and no clue where I'd go, but I wasn't about to let them bully me into giving up my savings. That money was my future, and I wasn't handing it over just because Matt couldn't get his act together. The next few days were tense. My parents barely spoke to me, and when they did, it was just guilt tripping. My mom would sit at the kitchen table sniffling, wiping her eyes like I'd shattered her whole world. My dad muttered stuff about how ungrateful I was, how I was tearing the family apart, but I held firm. I quietly packed my stuff, moving it bit by bit to a friend's place. I didn't want a scene. I just wanted to be gone. Part of me hoped they'd snap out of it and realize what they were asking wasn't fair. But day by day, it became clearer. They weren't budging. They had chosen Matt over me, and there was no changing their minds. The night before I was set to leave, my mom came into my room for one last attempt. Her eyes were red, and she sat on my bed. "Please don't do this," she said softly. "You don't have to leave. We can figure something out." I looked at her. "Mom, unless you're telling me I can stay without giving Matt my savings, we both know there's nothing to work out." She didn't say a word, just stared at the floor, then quietly got up and walked out. That was it. The next day, I packed the last of my things. Leaving felt surreal, like I was stepping out of one life and into a whole new one. Backpack over my shoulder, duffel bag in hand, heart pounding. My mom was in the kitchen staring at the table. She didn't say anything. My dad wasn't around. I guess that was their final message. They didn't care if I stayed or left. Out on the street, I felt a strange mix of freedom and panic. I hadn't really thought past this moment. I had a few things stashed at a buddy's place, and he'd offered his couch for a while. But the reality hit hard. I was basically homeless. Later that day, I showed up at his place. He was one of the few people I'd told everything to, and he was cool about letting me crash there. That night, I sat down and laid it all out. How my parents wanted my savings, how they kicked me out when I refused. "Dude, that's seriously messed up," he said, shaking his head. "Why the hell would they expect you to just give it up?" I shrugged. "It's always been like that with Matt. He screws up, and somehow it's on me to fix it. Only this time, they took it too far." We talked for hours. He said I could stay as long as I needed, which I appreciated, but I didn't want to overstay my welcome. I knew I couldn't live on his couch forever. The next few days were a blur. I hit up my school's housing office, hoping for emergency housing, but they had nothing available. They did give me a few leads for local resources, though, so that helped. I started looking for cheap places to rent near campus, but even with my savings, most were way out of my budget. And dipping into my business fund for rent? That made me sick to my stomach. Meanwhile, radio silence from my parents, not a single text or call. It was like I didn't exist anymore. I kept hoping they'd come to their senses, but nothing. Matt didn't say a word either, which honestly wasn't surprising. He was probably pissed I didn't fork over my savings for his fresh start. After about a week of couch surfing, it started to get to me. The uncertainty, the silence, the feeling of being cut off from everything. I was in limbo, trying to figure out who I was without them. One night I was sitting there, scrolling through my phone, debating whether I should reach out. Part of me wanted to make peace, even if I knew it wouldn't change anything. Then I got a message from Matt. It just said, "Hope you're happy. You've ruined everything." I stared at it, stunned. Ruined everything? Really? He tried to steal my savings, I got kicked out for standing up for myself, and somehow I was the villain? I didn't reply. There was no point. Anything I said would have turned into another fight, and I was done fighting. I tossed my phone on the couch and decided it was time to protect myself. The next day, I met with a lawyer. I'd been putting it off because I didn't want to make things worse. But after Matt's message, I wasn't taking chances. I needed to make sure my money was safe. The lawyer was actually really cool. Listened to everything, didn't interrupt, gave me solid advice. The good news? Legally, my parents couldn't touch a dime of my savings. The bad news? If they got desperate, they might try some shady loophole. He told me to lock down all my financial documents and keep a paper trail of every interaction with my family, just in case. I left that meeting feeling a little more in control. At least I knew I had legal protection and a plan if they tried anything. Still, the whole thing weighed heavy. I wasn't just dealing with a family fallout. I had to stay ready in case they came after me legally. That was a low I never expected from my own parents. Over the next couple weeks, I focused on rebuilding. I picked up a better-paying part-time job and saved every penny, determined not to touch my business fund unless it was life or death. I kept hunting for an apartment and finally got lucky. Found a tiny studio a little far from campus, but cheap and within budget. I moved in at the end of the month. It wasn't much. Just one room, a tiny kitchen, and a bathroom barely big enough to turn around in. But it was mine. After everything that happened, that meant everything. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had some control again. Things with my family, still dead quiet. Not a word from them. No apologies. No checking in. Nothing. It was like I'd been erased. And honestly, that hurt. But it was also kind of freeing. I didn't have to carry their weight anymore.